In the summer of 1958 at Camp Crystal Lake, 2 counselors are murdered after sneaking away from a campfire to have sex in...
Six?
To have sex in the storage
They're
barn.
sneaking away to have sex. Get your asses out of here.
Get your asses out of there.
Touching those titties.
Go on.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass. We're gonna die.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where your hosts ask, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday nights searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. Hi, I'm your host, the King Bee, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Kerri Gross.
Good evening.
And Eugene Lyons.
We're going to play Strip Monopoly. I'll be the shoe.
Together, we're going to take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we break out in a race car VHS tape rewinder and watch that movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, Kerri Gross, Eugene Lyons, and I will provide the audience with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off our respective rears. Find a comfortable spot on the sofa and accompany us for a journey through our vast VHS movie collections. Remember, you can download Shat The Movies via iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spotify, or wherever the finest podcasts are found.
Thanks, King B, for that intro. This week, we are doing another part of our October Shat The Movies Spooktacular. We are doing horror movies all month because, fuck it. Last week, we did Halloween, the 1978 original, and this week, we're doing something a little different. Staying in the vein of slasher flicks, but going a little more into what we do and specialize in is the 1980 Friday the 13th. For anyone who's been living under a rock for the last 38 years, Friday the 13th is an American slasher film, most notably starring Kevin Bacon. The film tells the story of a group of teenagers who are murdered by an unknown killer while attempting to reopen an abandoned summer camp. The filming of the movie took place in New Jersey in the summer of 1979 on an estimated budget of $550,000. So again, this was another independent movie, just like Halloween, which was done on $300,000. Slightly bigger budget 2 years later, but they did some very different things. Released in May of 1980, Friday the 13th was a major box office success, grossing over $39.7 million in the United States alone. Aside from being the first independent film of its kind to secure distribution in the U.S. by a major studio, its box office success led to a long series of sequels, a crossover with The Nightmare on Elm Street, and a 2009 series reboot. King B, since you're the senior on the podcast, where were you when you first saw Friday the 13th?
You're 2 months older than me. I don't recall ever seeing this in the theater. 1980, I was 1. So, I couldn't quite afford tickets on my own. I do remember when I was very, very young, my mother was engaged to my stepfather. They would bring home horrible horror films that I had no business knowing. So I have, flashes in my subconscious memory of American Werewolf in London, Chud, Basket Case, all those, some weird thing with like these space worms that ate people. And then at the end, even the people that got away were consumed by a space worm that was in the hill where they lived. It was just a giant thing. It was done. There is a catalog of horrors that lurk in my mind. I never saw this movie.
It's funny you mention that because now that you mention it, thinking back, like my mom and my cousin, who were really the 2 oldest people in the house growing up with me, also would like go to the VHS. They go to the video store and they'd always get horror movies. They get House. House freaked the shit out of me when I was a kid.
House was real.
Horror movies were like a big thing, and I wonder if like part of, I don't know if it was just like how ubiquitous the offering of horror movies was at VHS, or maybe people just felt more comfortable watching them in the house. I don't know, but there were a lot of horror movies around that were completely inappropriate. So like if there was titties, they'd kick me out of the room, but for some reason, if it was like people getting slashed, it was like no big deal.
I was going to ask if either of you, if your parents allowed you to watch rated R movies, if you had any restrictions on films. My parents didn't give a fuck what I watched. I was watching NC-17, rated R, at a young age. My favorite movie as a 3-year-old was Silence of the Lambs, which explains a lot.
If I had to speculate, I would say that it was a maneuver on my future stepfather's part to terrify us into leaving the room so adults could be adults without children. I still remember to this day the werewolf coming out of American Werewolf's mouth, and I'm hiding behind his back because I can't look at the screen. And eventually you just get so tired of being terrified, you'll just go do any other thing. So maybe it's just to get the kids out of the room. Let's torture them emotionally.
No, my dad would threaten me if I didn't go to bed that Chucky was going to get me or that Freddy Krueger was at the end of the hallway. So if I, was refusing to go to bed or sneaking out of bed, it was like, Freddy Krueger is going to come and get you in your nightmares. So I'd be terrified and try to force myself to fall asleep. But I never saw Friday the 13th. I thought I had, but again, it's another first for me. There was familiar scenes, but as the plot unfolded, I realized I had no idea how it was going to end.
I have this recurring theme of like the first time I saw certain movies. Again, Friday the 13th, I saw it while I was at goth clubs. Like they would have it projected onto screen. So I never got the audio, but just by watching the scenes repeatedly week after week, I kind of got the storyline along with like a lot of Nitzer Ebb. So it kind of worked together. But this was my third or fourth time watching the movie in its entirety with the audio. And I think for me, Friday the 13th is probably my favorite mainstream slasher. Like I'm a big fan of Nightmare on Elm Street, but I think Friday the 13th, something about Jason, it's so iconic. And it's just all the things that I want out of a slasher movie. So I'm really excited to be doing this one. This one's near and dear to my heart.
So check it out. We're going to go ahead and play the trailer right now.
Hello? Who's that? Oh, hi. What are you doing out in this mess?
1, 2, 3.
We weren't doing anything. We were just messing up.
4. 5. 6. 7.
Can I help you? Hello?
8. 9. 10. 11. 12. Friday the 13th. You may only see it once, but that will be enough. Friday the 13th.
In the summer of 1958 at Camp Crystal Lake, 2 counselors are murdered after sneaking away from a campfire to have sex in a storage barn. 21 years later, camp counselor Annie Phillips is given a lift halfway to the reopened Camp Crystal Lake by a truck driver named Enos. Annie learns about the murders that a young boy drowned at Crystal Lake in 1957. She hitches another ride from an unseen person who chases her into the woods and slashes her throat.
Okay, so as soon as this movie starts, I'm like, I know there's got to be some camp stories.
I did go to a summer camp. It was the budget YMCA summer camp for kids. I begged my parents, I'm sure because I was enthralled with Hey Dude and whatever was on Nickelodeon at the time. Can't Salute Your Shorts? That was the camp show.
Camp Anawana?
Camp Anawana. So it was 7 days. My parents were glad to be rid of us. They were late to pick us up. I don't get it. It's okay. You make lanyards, you meet a bunch of kids, and you have to make friends. I think that children are conditioned to believe things are a certain way from what they've seen on TV. And summer camp is just one of those things where you go and you think you have to find a girlfriend and you think you have a best camp friend. And you go through all those motions. As an adult, if I were to go through those things, I'd be like, I wouldn't have any interest. I'm here for a week. I'm going to eat the food. I'm going to do the activity. I'm not making lifelong friends.
Were camp counselors having sex behind every corner?
God, I hope so.
I went to student council camp. Surprise, surprise. I also went to a thing called Boys State. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Boys State, but Boys State is when they take all the young male leaders in Arizona and they send them to a camp together, and we learn about leadership. So Boys State was one thing I did, and then I did a student council camp at junior high, which was like actually like this kind of camp where you're in cabins and you do the bushwhacking and rowing and all that stuff. And then after that, I did high school student council camp, and I took a machete to that, very Jason-esque. And on the last night, I decided that it would be a great idea to take that machete, and because I'm Persian, wrap a towel around my head like a turban.
My dad loves this story.
Yeah, run naked into the showers, screaming la 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 la, and scared everybody out of the showers. An hour later, the police showed up in my dorm.
Is it cultural appropriation if it's appropriate to your own culture?
No, that's just being you. It's cultural celebration. So the police came, and lesson to everybody: if you have a weapon in your dorm or apartment or house, and the police come and they say if you hand over the weapon, you will not get in any trouble, they're lying to you.
Cops lie?
Yeah, amazing. And so they took the machete. I got called in by the vice principal of my school and was expelled from Chandler High School, and that's how I ended up going to Dobson High School. So yes, Gene Lyons expelled from summer camp. Friday the 13th. But enough about me. Let's talk about scary movies, in particular Friday the 13th's relationship to Halloween. So last week we did Halloween, and the first thing I noticed is as I'm watching this thing is it seems like a direct either an homage or ripoff of Halloween, depending on how you look at it. With the first person perspective, for the first kill, I was like, this feels really, really familiar.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading a few interviews that the director was saying he was just writing off the curtails of John Carpenter, another independent film with a small budget, and again, another first-person point of view of the killer. I did enjoy this. I feel like I enjoyed it better in Friday the 13th, only because it lasts longer, it's more suspenseful. For a huge portion of the movie, we don't know who the killer is. And, without giving too much away, there's this shock at the end that's a little more shocking than young Michael Myers.
For me, Friday the 13th was like Halloween, but so much better. Like, yeah, there was similarities, but this movie had these great screams. You remember Jamie Lee Curtis's scream in Halloween was just kind of half-assed. Annie, like most people dying in Halloween were just like, you're like, I don't care. This movie had great screams, great blood. There's the scene where, Annie gets her throat slit. It's just gorgeous the way they played out the effects. Again, this is only 2 years later and with a slightly larger budget. The tension was great. And I feel like every scene where somebody was killed was so much more dynamic and exciting. They fought a little bit. They ran a little bit. It seemed like there was something going on rather than this unstoppable juggernaut of Michael Myers just coming in and slowly killing you.
So I've never been a fan of horror, especially modern horror. I think it's all torture porn, just straight gore and jump scares. And I find those things to just be tedious and tired. I felt like this was a novelty. We're watching it. The characters all seem kind of bright and very, I want to say bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but they still seem genuine in a sense. It's not quite a parody. Something was off about this I couldn't put my finger on. And it starts right with that first murder. I'm definitely in Scooby-Doo mystery mode immediately trying to figure out, because the guy clearly recognizes the person that is confronting him, and he's not afraid. He's not concerned. It's, oh, hey, it's you. I was just grabbing some titty with my shoes on.
We weren't doing anything.
We weren't doing
swear.
anything. So I knew immediately that there's more going on here than it's just a killer. And then they introduce, the hitchhiking girl with the backpack who apparently checks out dogs' dicks to address them gender appropriately. And when she walks into the restaurant, everyone is playing a part. And again, something's off about this movie that comes to me later on that I really am excited about.
It's kind of like a horror meets Clue from the first person killer perspective. But in comparing it to Halloween, I think I have to say that the music is awful. And, I was praising Carpenter for building tension and suspense with his music, the soundtrack. And this is just like terrible jolting violin. It's like, ree, ree, ree. And then on top of that, the ominous which I had to Google because I didn't know how to phonetically spell that out for the podcast notes. And it's actually ki, 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 mom, 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 which is supposed to be, which you'll later find out, kill, 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 mom, mom, mom.
One of the things I really liked about the 80s that you don't see that much now is this egalitarian approach to sexuality. Like, I don't know, Kerri, I'm glad you're here to talk about this because I was watching this and I was like, all the guys are like in cutoff shorts. They got no shirts on. They got bandanas on and hiking boots and wool crew socks. And I like that these guys were like showing as much skin to the ladies. Even in the swimming scenes, you had people in their swimming trunks and their bikinis. Everyone looked real good. And I feel like, again, going from this 1978's Halloween to 80s Friday the 13th, like people look way sexier in this movie. Again, as a woman, like as you're seeing these guys on screen, is it doing anything for you?
I can't even put into words how much I fucking hate Kevin Bacon. So, nope, did nothing for me.
But what about Steve with his hot bod?
God, no.
Chopping
Steve.
wood.
No,
nothing.
The only thing good about the 70s is natural tits and pubic hair.
I do like those things. I gotta say, as soon as that camera pans over to Steve chopping wood, he's shirtless, he's sweaty, he's got those loose denim shorts and those thick, heavy wool socks and waterproof hiking boots. I can't imagine a more uncomfortable outfit for chopping wood in a humid summer.
Well, lucky for him, he doesn't do any more work throughout the rest of the movie. He watches Alice nail in 2 nails into a gutter. Done. He goes through some art. He goes to the store. He spends all day in town, and he's like, everyone else get to work. But there's a lot of treachery on this road to town. And as we see in the death of Annie, when she gets picked up by the second driver who is unnamed, and she realizes things aren't going well, she has to jump out of a car. And I know for Kerri and I, that got a lot of bells ringing.
Yeah, first of all, I'm like, would anyone survive jumping out of a vehicle going that fast? And I don't mean surviving like she would die, but wouldn't she break something? He was going fucking fast.
She leaps right out onto a rock. Yeah. It's the first thing she touches.
So it reminded me of this awful story, and I don't know if I've ever told you, Gene, my Uber story. I had to delete the Uber app because a girlfriend and I were really, really, really drunk, and we were sharing an Uber home, and we dropped her off first. And I was married at the time, and I text my ex-husband. I'm meeting him wherever. And I'm super drunk. Like, I got one eye open in the back of the Uber, and I keep looking at these signs, and I'm like, he's driving the wrong way. And I had read all these terrible stories of Uber drivers taking girls out to the desert. Long story short, I start yelling at him that he's taking me the wrong way, and I called my ex-husband from the back seat, and I'm describing the Uber driver, and he can hear me, and I'm threatening him by saying, I'm telling my ex-husband what you look like, and we're driving out to the desert, and he's going to kill me, and the next thing I know, we just pull up to my house. I was like, okay, sorry, bye, thanks. And my ex-husband's like trying to fight the Uber driver, and I'm like, no, really, he was driving me home. I just couldn't read the signs, and so I tipped him $30 and deleted my Uber app.
Sorry, Uber.
So if you ever are in a car with someone who won't stop the car, I have some advice for you, dear listener. To answer your question of how badly someone would get hurt, if you're wearing normal clothing, so let's say you're wearing jeans, maybe a long sleeve shirt, you're probably looking at about 35 miles per hour is the max speed you can safely jump out. Anything beyond that, you are putting your life at risk.
We were on the freeway. I would have fucking died. Thank God I didn't think about jumping out of the vehicle that was actually driving to my destination.
Yeah, so in the case of this, you're going down a dirt country road. What you really want to do is wait until the driver is taking a bend, because the biggest threat when you jump out of a car is actually getting hit by the car itself. So when they're taking a bend, you want to make your exit when they're turning to the opposite side of the door you're on. So say if you're on the right side door, if they're turning left is when you want to jump out. If you're on the left side, you want to wait till they're turning right. And the inertia of that turn will actually help you get clear of the car and roll away. This is really key. Get low on the floorboard if you can. So you want to get on your hands and knees on the floorboard so you're not sitting upright, and it's going to help you roll away. And so what you want to do is get as low as you can, and then don't put your hands or legs down first. That's like the wrong instinct. They will break. So you got to keep them in tight to your body, like any pointy part. So this is the same with a motorcycle wreck too. Elbows, knees, hips, ankles, put everything in tight.
Tuck and roll.
Fists under your chin and bring your elbows together, and keep your chin tucked into your chest to protect your head.
I'm not putting my fist underneath my chin. My knee's going to hit my elbow. My fist is going to go right into my teeth. That's it for me. No, I'm just going to high dive it and roll violently.
So be sure to tune into our Instagram as we reenact the safe way to fucking exit a moving vehicle.
One last tip, exit with your back facing the direction of travel. As King B was just saying, with your back, you actually want to hit it kind of on the fat part of your back, not your spine, but somewhere between your shoulder and your back, and roll from that.
And before your face hits the concrete, make sure to check under the car if anyone's going to cut your Achilles tendons.
True story. I had a motorcycle wreck and was bleeding profusely out of my face. King B ran over and actually, did you stuff the t-shirt in my face to stop the bleeding?
Yes, I had a dirty, sweaty t-shirt that was in the storage compartment of a oily old two-stroke motorcycle. And I thought, this guy needs care, and shoved a wadded up t-shirt in his mouth.
That's right. You brought me back to reality.
Yeah.
So at camp, counselors Ned, Jack, Bill, Marcy, Brenda, and Alice, along with owner Steve Christie, refurbish the cabins and facilities. As a thunderstorm approaches, Steve leaves the campground to stock supplies. Ned sees someone walk into one of the cabins and follows. While Jack and Marcy have sex in one of the cabin bunk beds, they are unaware of Ned's body directly above them with his throat slit. I'm
confused. How old, and did I miss this? How old are these camp counselors? Are they high schoolers? Are they college age?
I think they're high school age, but I was confused by the relationship between Alice and Steve. Because like if Steve's owning and running the place, but it seems like they had a romantic relationship. And this is actually, I looked it up because this is kind of one of the things that's perplexed Friday the 13th fans for decades is what the hell was going, they never go back into that story of like what was going on between them. It seems like Steve had some sort of a predatory relationship with Alice. Like
he's an adult and she's a high school camp counselor, but she's living with him, working with him. Was she a previous camp attendee?
I'm going to say that this is post-high school. This is maybe a year or two break before they're able to go to college, economically kind of depressed. So they're probably working through the summer to save up some cash. Steve, I liked that little relationship bit. And this is where I really started keying in on what I felt was off about this movie. What we're watching here is a very elaborate murder stage play. Every character is playing a role, and you don't see any real character arcs or development. They live in their world and we're just getting a peek at it. So I kind of liked the notion that they're on a relationship that's on its last legs, and he's really trying to make this camp work, and he's hoping she'll stick by it. And he thinks that he can keep them together, and she's willing to give it a shot, but she's got some reservations.
So beyond enjoying the story arc, what did you think of the dialogue? Because the entire time I'm like, these characters are boring. The scenes where they're like hanging out on the dock and Ned is fake drowning, I'm like, this is boring and fluff and unnecessary.
This is camp. This is what happens at camp. You're like, we're hanging out on a dock for 6 hours and you start doing goofy things. That's why there's camp songs. That's why you have to like do archery and shit, because there's nothing to do. The dialogue is not the strong suit of this movie, and neither is the acting. Kevin Bacon, an accomplished actor by all means at this point, I'd forgotten he was in this movie, and there's a reason why. First of all, he's killed off really quickly, but secondly, like he has no presence in this movie. He can't fucking act. Unlike Jamie Lee Curtis, who I think did an okay job in Halloween, he has nothing special about him. And I'm really surprised that 4 years later he gets Footloose and he's a star after that, and then he really developed into something special a bit later. But in this movie, he is not the best actor in the movie, and there are no good actors in the movie.
So I think you're really looking at this wrong. The Friday the 13th isn't a Kevin Bacon vehicle. He's not a name in this movie. No one is supposed to be. He just happens to be in it. One of my favorite parts about this movie is actually the relationship that he has with his girlfriend. It's a completely encapsulated, very healthy, non-typical 70s camp style relationship. It's obvious to me that they have real genuine feelings for each other. They're very happy to be together. They make each other more positive people. They're able to kind of weather the storm of their negative friend. And even when they start to fool around, he's a very patient and slow, like attentive lover.
Yeah, he even covers her boobs so I can't see them for most of the scene.
You only get one titty out of this movie, and it's because Kevin Bacon's really looking out for her.
I'm going to make a small plug here and say if anyone's Kevin Bacon fan, they should go on shatthemovies.com/vote and pick through Kerri's favorite movies, because Tremors is on there. And if we want to break apart Kevin Bacon, Tremors is a fucking garbage fire that is wonderful.
So getting back to titties, the whole, like, I was so disappointed in the strip monopoly scene. Well, actually I wasn't, because we know how strip monopoly is going to go. It's not going to go well. Like,
yeah, I did the totals as they're wrapping up the game. We end up with one broad in a very sensible and modest bra panty set. One guy's got a missing boot and his shirt is off. Between the three of them, they've drank 5 beers and possibly smoked one Virginia Slim-sized marijuana cigarette. This is a sex scene in a murder movie for Mormons.
I think they're fucking sissies. Like the scene where the snake is crawling around in the room. How many fucking people does it take to kill a snake? And then upon reading, because I was like, that looks really fucking real. Like they chopped that snake's head off. It looks like a real snake. It was real. They killed a real snake for the sake of this disappointing scene.
so other things that get killed in this movie, Ned. I think when he went into the cabin, King B was like, we were watching it together, and he's like, yeah, that dude's a goner. And you don't see him for a while. And I think that was one of the really cool things about the movie is you got this sex scene and you're expecting Kevin Bacon to get killed or Marcy, his girlfriend, to get killed. And instead the camera pans up while they're kind of holding hands and there's just Ned's dead body there. And this is really a horror movie just going the extra mile. It's letting the tension build in the normal ways that a horror movie does. Very classic approach to horror. But then they find ways to surprise us. And throughout the movie, I think there were little twists and turns that made it special.
It was a great reveal. I liked that his eyes are wide open and his mouth is kind of agape. And for a minute, I didn't capture that he was dead. I thought he just happened to be there listening to his friends do it. And it really brought me right back to that Forrest Gump moment where Jenny's roommate listens to Forrest premature ejaculate. I loved it. It was great. And then I go, oh no, he's dead. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, this is when we start to see the true comparisons between Halloween and Friday the 13th is, you know, the murders, the gore, and the 70s, you know, pre-CGI effects that start to kick in here.
But one of the things we do see here is, you know, Kerri, you mentioned that there's a bunch of sissies in this camp. I've kind of talked about how some people just kind of deserve to be dead, but one of them stood apart, and I think it was, we start to see these tinges of, if not heroism, then at least hustle early on in Alice.
I mean, she's just, survival's in her DNA. From the moment she shows up, before there's any danger, she's never phoning it in. She's cleaning when she first shows up. She's also managing the books for Steve, who can't apparently hold his business together. She's doing home repairs and hanging gutters while he's yapping in her ear and showing her pictures he drew. When orders need to be delivered, she's at a dead run over to the lake. Hey, we need paint. Running right back. Hey, I've got to get to work on this thing. She's got a hustle that is inherent, and it's true. She's a real champion. And there's a reason you're rooting for her throughout this movie.
Also, she can roll a real skinny joint. When Marcy leaves to use the bathrooms, Jack's throat is pierced with an arrow from beneath the bed. The killer follows Marcy to the bathroom and slams an axe into her face. Brenda hears a child's voice calling for help and ventures outside to the archery range, where the lights turn on. Later, Steve returns to the camp and is confronted by an unseen killer who stabs him. Here's where I start talking shit about the movie. Speaking of Jack getting an arrow to the throat, I think it's the only scene that I enjoyed in this movie. I don't think an arrow could pierce through a mattress and then his trachea with such precision, but it comes at such a shock because, you know, they're post-coital, he's laying in bed, you know that something is about to happen. I don't know if we know for sure that Ned is on the bunk bed. Like, I didn't catch that. I knew he was near, but I didn't know he was on the bunk bed. The blood drops on his face, and then they don't even let Jack find Ned. Like, I thought he was going to get up, start screaming. He found Ned, and then, the horror ensues. The blood drops on his face, and the next thing you know, an arrow through the trachea, and he's dead. So, I mean, that was kind of a shock.
I mean, it's definitely shocking. It's the most violent thing you're going to see in this movie. Every other murder, I mean, you've got
An axe to the face is pretty violent.
But you don't actually see the axe hit the face. You see the after effect, and it's old-timey special effects, so it's kind of corny. You don't really have to take it that seriously. But everyone else is being stabbed in the gut just off camera, or they're having their throat cut, and it's, again, corny. All the actual, like, death blows and the stuff where you should see the gore happening that they would love to jump on in today's movies always just kind of happen off screen. And I find that kind of charming and comforting, really.
Well, I did enjoy the gore here. I feel like what Halloween lacked in gore, Friday the 13th makes up for with axe to the skull, trachea stabbing, throat slitting, arrows, etc. I feel like if I could mix the suspense and soundtrack of Halloween with Friday the 13th as gore, then if the actors could only act a little bit better, this might be a zero-wipe movie.
I just find gore to be such a cheap shot. You're just getting me to cringe, and I'm not interested or entertained by that stuff.
What about shock? Like, not gore, but like you get afraid, when something jumps out at you that you're not expecting.
No, that's just like as much in the same way I wouldn't want someone to come up and scream at me. I also don't like jump scares in movies. Like, okay, it's scary in the sense that it's startling, but it's not truly scary. It's just like, oh, it's that fucking ghost that's always yelling at me.
What do you think it is with like the human psyche that we feel the need to pay to have things to scare us, like roller coasters and horror movies? And
parents didn't hit you right.
We learn that if we can be in a safe environment and yet still have that part of our nervous system stimulated, that's super exciting,
I don't get the thrill of being in a safe place but feeling danger. Danger sucks. What's like great is like good things. So I don't
quote, what's great? Good things. So when you meet the girl off of Bumble or Tinder and she kind of wants you to choke her a little bit.
I mean, listen, I'll step up to the plate, but I'm just so bored to tears with what you think is scary and dangerous.
That's another charming and key factor of the Friday the 13th, though, is that it's not just, as we mentioned before, it's not just a horror movie. That there's a mystery element, King B, that you mentioned before. All the characters that are coming and going and the timelines that are overlapping add a little bit of a whodunit to the movie. So remember, when people were watching this movie in 1980, they didn't know who the killer was. And I bet you if you talk to most people today and you say Friday the 13th, they just assume Jason has been the killer from the get-go.
As someone that hadn't known the full plot of this movie, I kept thinking, where the fuck is Jason? And why is it, advertised as a hockey mask? Like, where is this fucking hockey mask? Where is this hockey mask?
Yeah, so remember in 80, the hockey mask wasn't even a thing at the time. So anybody watching this movie is going, oh, is it the cop that comes in on the motorcycle? Is it Ralph, the crazy, you're all doomed guy? Is it Steve, who left camp for a while? Is it Enos, the trucker? Like, pretty much anybody could be the killer at this point, and I think that was really exciting at the time.
At a certain point, I said to myself, oh yeah, that's right, Jason's going to be in this. Now I remember. And I was starting to put it together because the way every character is reacting to the killer when they first see him, clearly they're not confronting a 7-foot-tall mongoloid. Can you say mongoloid?
Yes.
You can.
Yeah.
I said mongoloid. They're kind of looking upward at somebody. It's someone that's familiar. It's someone that they feel safe and comfortable around. And what you're going to find later on, there's no way anyone would react to that. I don't care how common it is. Could the hitchhiking girl's dialogue with the dog and mistaking its gender in the very beginning of this movie be the Easter egg that we were all too dumb to catch?
But, I think the movie does kind of throw you for a loop, though, in ways that
Sorry
are...
about that. You're a boy.
somewhat disingenuous in the fact that, you do see an arrow go through a mattress and through someone's trachea, and you're thinking it's got to be somebody who's, pretty strong, people getting pinned against walls. And then also you get to the hearing the child's voice, right? And you're like, okay, so this is a voice that would seem to give you an indication of who the killer is if it could call to a person.
That was my least favorite part of this movie. That was the one moment where I checked out when you hear that saccharine baby doll voice crying for help. I thought well, that's just unrealistic. No one trying to lure someone would talk like that. I think you've got a better chance, and I got more buy-in if it's just some frat boy going, caca, caca, as opposed to a weird little girl voice calling for help.
Who the fuck's going to leave a cabin if there's a drunk frat boy yelling caca outside in a rainstorm?
You're telling me that if you heard a drunk hobo, can you say hobo?
Wait, when did this frat boy become a hobo?
No. This is a hypothetical question.
okay.
It has nothing to do with that. Outside of your home, and you just heard some drunk man being like, help me, or whatever.
Sex.
You'd probably be like, fuck that dude, he's drunk. But if you heard a tiny child that was like, help me, help, I'm in a well, help. You would be more inclined to help a child. And I think that's the trap is like, oh my God, there's a child out here?
I get it, but in that moment, you're going to be so terrified that you're not going to have the presence of mind to really catalog that. I'm just not buying it.
I was at King B's apartment in, I believe, 1999.
Oh my God, I know
was
what you're
it?
talking about.
And there was a little child.
It was my 21st birthday.
Was your 21st birthday? So, okay.
And we were getting ready to go out. And I'm getting all dressed. It's my big day. And I know it was a big deal
Jello shots.
Because Gene Lyons is 2 months older than me. And we walk out. We're going to go to the bar. And I open my door. And right in front of us, there's a little play area at the apartment complex where I live. And there's a 2-year-old Mexican girl.
Time of day.
2-year-old Hispanic girl.
Time of
Not
day.
a Mongoloid. It is 12:30 at night. It's dark. There's no one else out there. And there's this little girl.
And she said, help me, help me.
Help me. So we do what in today's world, you would never do this. I picked the girl up. We wrapped her in a towel and brought her inside. And
now you're both sexual offenders on a
And
registry.
The cops showed up and we were like, hey, we found this kid. What's the deal? And the cops are like, well, can you guys just watch her for a while we figure out what's going on?
What?
And they left me. And there's a photo of me sitting in a lazy boy on my 21st birthday, laughing my ass off, cradling an unknown 2-year-old Mexican baby girl. Hispanic.
And she was like wearing barely anything. This is in late October.
She was in a diaper.
It was chilly out.
It was cold.
Yeah.
And we cared for her for about 3 hours. We later found out the parents had left. They'd left a 12 to 13-year-old in charge. They went to sleep or they smoked the marijuana
They went
cigarettes.
across the street to fuck somebody at their friend's house who was also babysitting.
Exactly.
The 12-year-old is wearing a clown mask and killing sexual deviants.
And the 2-year-old wandered out into the play area because that's where she hung out. So, that's a weird one. Blast from the past.
Would you, in that same scenario, if there was apparently a drunken frat boy hobo outside in the playground going, hey,
help me.
Would you still go out there, wrap him in a towel, and let him stay in your apartment for 2 hours until his parents came home?
I mean, Mr. Rogers says we're put on this earth to be a service to others. So, of course, I know that in that environment, far removed, how did a child get out there? It's very unlikely. This is clearly a ruse. I'd be much more apt to, if someone was like, help, I'm injured. Oh, okay, that's another adult out here. That's a lot more realistic to me than a child.
Yeah, I mean, again, remember also, this is a rainstorm. There's electricity to very few of the cabins. Everyone's running around in the dark. The only way you can tell who's who, even out in this darkness, is like by the color of their raincoats. It's the movie is really much playing on this storm, which again is a theme in Friday the 13th movies that extends even into the video game. Is this inclement weather being a factor in Jason's killings?
One of the things that really started to poke out at me was every character has their own raincoat, and it is a very specific color. I would pay money to see Wes Anderson present Friday the 13th as maybe just a 45-minute prelude to his next film where he shoots his version of Friday the 13th, because I'd love to see everyone's outfits.
Fucking incredible.
I'd like to see Friday the 13th meets the Power Rangers. Which color are you going to be?
So here we are, worried by their friends' disappearances. Alice and Bill leave the main cabin to investigate. They find a bloody axe in Brenda's bed, the phone's disconnected, and the cars are inoperable. When the power goes out, Bill goes to check on the generator. Alice heads out to look for him and discovers his body pinned with arrows to the generator room's door. She flees back to the main cabin to hide, only to be traumatized further when Brenda's body is thrown through the window.
Okay, this is where I start going, the killer's gotta be some giant fucking dude, because the physics of Bill's body being it makes no sense. He's pinned up there with arrows. It's not like he was in midair and an arrow caught him and then he got stuck there.
And by giant man, you mean mongoloid?
No, I just mean a very strong,
Maybe Ruth.
very strong man. But the thing is, Bill he wasn't killed by the arrows. He was killed and then stuck up on the door there. And again, I thought the movie did a great job of the suspense while Bill's checking out the generator and like, how is he going to die? You know, a couple times he turns around and like, oh, here it comes. Then it doesn't. And then when finally his body is, discovered, it's a shock when the door shuts and he's there. But at the same time, at this point, they're feeding you some clues that are kind of misleading.
Again, to my point, you do never see him get killed. He just disappears and then shows up as a pincushion. Also, I would think that in a scenario like that, it's a team effort. You need one person to hoist the body up there, the other person to drive arrows.
I'm going to say, from somebody that works in an environment where I have to lift and roll and turn people that are incapacitated, people that are paralyzed, working in the ICU with patients that are 300 fucking pounds. There is no way that even a male, I really cannot envision a situation, unless you're Andre the fucking Giant, could pick up a human body that is deceased, because the term dead weight is truly that. Your body weight, I feel like, doubles when you're flaccid and dead, and picks them up. Also chuckling in the room is everybody when I said flaccid. Picks up a body and throws it through the fucking window. I mean, they are going out of their way for us to think that this is some giant monster. So not only does this begin me thinking that there's no fucking possible way that any human being could throw human bodies like this, I start to get very annoyed because this begins the Alice sleeps all the time. After finding a bloody axe and all their friends are missing, Bill tells Alice, why don't you stay here and try to get some sleep? I'm sorry, but if all my fucking friends are missing and I'm out in the woods and I suspect someone is on a murderous rampage, I wouldn't be able to sleep for days. And not only that, but he says one of us should stay here, but then she's supposed to sleep and they're splitting up. Isn't that like the first rule of any emergent situation, is like, don't split up. Also, don't fucking sleep.
Wait, you're picking on Alice here? Alice is the most capable of all of the campers. She doesn't fuck around like other horror movie characters. One of the things I loved is Alice, she's like, we got to call for help. They go to the office and it's locked, and 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100, maybe 999 out of 1,000 horror movie characters are going to be like, oh no, we can't get in. Jiggle the door a little bit. She fucking breaks the window and is like, we're going in. We're making a fucking phone call. The phone's dead. And she's like, why don't we just hike out of here? Like, she's not fucking around. Alice is smart.
She's so smart that she barricades a door that opens outward by tying a rope on it and then moving a bunch of boxes of shit in front of a door of a cabin full of windows, and then just like walks around the cabin worried and stressed instead of leaving. She's so smart, she tied an outwardly opening door.
Okay, listen. If this is a play, she's working with the tools available to her.
It's not a play, it's a movie. It's called Friday the 13th.
Gene and I also noticed she tied the door, and we were like, oh, that's really smart. And then she starts to barricade it. That's where she slips up. But, to Gene's point, she doesn't stop moving. She doesn't let an obstacle get in her way. She's going through it. She's going around it. She stays on the move. She's keeping a tactical mindset. She's really in this game to win. She's got a lot of serious talent that I'm rooting for. I know she's going to go far.
All right. Soon after, Alice sees a vehicle pull up and rushes outside, thinking it's Steve. She is greeted by a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Voorhees, who claims to be an old friend of Steve's. As Alice brings her inside, Mrs. Voorhees sees Brenda's body and begins to reminisce that her son Jason was the young boy who drowned in 1957. She blames his death on the counselors who were supposed to be watching him, but were instead having sex and not paying attention to Jason's drowning. Revealing herself as the killer, Mrs. Voorhees rushes toward Alice with a Bowie knife. Following a confrontation wherein Mrs. Voorhees is knocked out, she finds Alice at the shore and attempts to kill her again, but Alice decapitates her with a machete.
Two things. Is there a theme in late 70s, early 80s movies where there is murdering of people that are having premarital sex. I mean, we talked a little bit about Halloween. Seems to have carried over in this theme. Alice is the one that we don't see, you know, making sexual innuendos, jokes, being intimate with anybody. I mean, there's an implied relationship with Steve, but the same with Jamie Lee Curtis. She's almost kind of this like virgin, naive character.
Yeah, absolutely. They're all morality plays in that sense. That the more sexualized, the more of a drug user, the more socially rebellious you are, the faster you're going to die in these movies. And I think that's really stayed consistent for decades now.
I think that, you know, as a people, we're definitely applying our own morality to this. Oh, she had sex, she's going to die, or oh, they did drugs. And ultimately, I don't think it's about their vices. It's just once they are not vigilant is when they become victims. And I think that Alice is constantly on the move. She's shown herself to be a jack of all trades. She's got a high skill set. It's not about vice. It's about the fact that she's just got a mindset. She's going to live.
For me, the cool thing about Mrs. Voorhees, though, is that when she shows up, you know, you are relieved. You're like, oh, thankfully a responsible adult is here with a car and it's going to be okay. And you really don't like watching that madness kind of unfold was really enjoyable. I think that it was a great job. Like, again, you don't need a lot of good acting in this movie. Most people are just there to get killed. But this one person, this one role, it is important that she be able to grasp the gravity of that transformation between a helpful middle-aged woman and a psychotic killer.
I even feel at one point that Alex could have potentially talked her way through this. Yeah, you do see that madness unfolding. It is a great, strong performance. And you think that if she had maybe shown a little bit of sympathy and regret for Jason's mom, you know, I'm sorry that happened to you, or that was awful, or clearly those kids weren't fucking, they still had their shoes on.
Talk her off the ledge.
Well,
Right.
You never fucked with your shoes on?
Let's get all Raj here for a minute. Hey, guys, do you fuck with your shoes on? Because that's disgusting. I can't even... I might not be able to get a hard on with socks.
I'm weird like that. I can fuck with shoes on or barefoot, but having sex with socks on is really weird to me. I mean, I can do it. Don't get me wrong. I'm camping or something like that, but I'd rather not.
How many times have you had sex with shoes on?
Like times or people?
Times.
Maybe 20?
No shit.
Yeah.
I can't even think of one time I've had a shoe on.
Where?
No, both shoes.
Where are you
I
at?
know, I mean,
is this
just
a
in
public
general.
thing?
Oh,
you know what? I did do it with shoes on.
I did it with shoes on at
you
your
know
house.
who it was. At my house?
Yeah.
Gross.
Sorry.
No.
The 2-year-old was not involved.
No, this is at his house, not his apartment.
I got a grosser story than that.
Do tell.
Well, you remember my first lady friend back in the day, the origin story of all my heartbreaks and horrors.
I'm aware, yes.
We used to walk. There was one main street, and it was a half a mile walk from her house to my house. And along the side of the street, there was this grassy retention area
Where I used to run my dog.
where Gene would run his dogs. And if you're down in the bottom of this grassy retention area, which just looks like a park, you can't really see into cars.
Pitch black.
Well, no, middle of the day,
What?
right?
It's also outside
Now,
of an elementary school.
As an adult, this was before we were driving. You know, so when you're walking down there and you're looking up, you just barely see the tops of the cars on the road. Now, when I'm in a car as an adult now, I see everything that's going on down in that retention basin. But me and,
Yeah. Diaper breath.
oh, man.
Diaper breath.
Okay, well, second follow-up story. We'll get to that in just a moment. We got it on publicly and apparently in wide open view a lot. So I guess I did do it with my shoes.
Why didn't you just go in that alley that was like 10
'Cause
feet
that's an
away?
alley. That's disgusting.
Keep your shoes on.
That's disgusting. An alley? You're disgusting. Okay, so diaper breath.
Yeah.
When I was 15, I met a girl and we fell for each other quickly. It was that junior high school thing.
Beautiful girl.
The best looking girl in high school, and I had no business being with her. And we dated for probably 2 years, quite a long time.
You lost your V card?
Different story. So, I was kind of like the stray dog, and she was like just a kindly person. Her family kind of took me in. We broke up. I came apart. I mean, mentally destroyed. Fast forward, we're at a show at Nita's Hideaway back before they'd torn it down. And I crossed paths with her and the guy that she went on to date immediately after me. So she comes up to me and I haven't seen her in quite some time. And I'm just like, hey, I'm really sorry. I clearly didn't handle things well. And I'm just so embarrassed. Like, that's not who I want to be. And she starts to talk to me. And I noticed something that I had just shut out all those years before, is that this beautiful girl had chronic diaper breath. And I don't mean she had bad breath. She had breath that smelled like a diaper. And I had blocked it out for years and years until she had begun to talk to me. And suddenly this flood of memories and recollections of all the times I kissed this woman who had diaper breath. And to this day, that's all I can think about.
King B did not come to violence in that scenario, but there was a lot of violence between Alice and Mrs. Voorhees, which I thought was the most gripping fight scenes in the movie. And really the only person who was capable of fighting back was Alice.
The most gripping.
She looks like Nikki Cox. Like Mary Tyler Moore and Nikki Cox together.
Okay, come back to us.
I'm sorry.
Come back to us, King B.
Diaper breath. Okay. Where were we?
The most gripping. Okay, so a 65-plus-year-old woman that's capable of throwing a dead body through a window and killing all of these, early adult, late teenagers. Like, none of them were able to defend themselves. And so then we see the first attack of Mrs. Voorhees attacking Alice. And as my notes that I wrote was like, is she going to bitch slap Alice to death? And she is just slapping her over and over again. And I was reading this interview that because she's theater trained, they're trained to actually slap each other on stage, but, like cupped palm. And so Betsy Palmer was hired to film for 10 days. She was late in her career. It was read in an interview that she was in dire need of a new vehicle. And so she was given the script. She told her agent that she thought it was a quote unquote pile of shit, which I might not disagree with her. But they paid her $1,000 a day to film just these fight scenes. Every other scene where the killer is depicted, where we don't know who they are played by somebody else. So she films these fight scenes with Alice, and I try not to talk about the movies with Big D or Gene or Raj or King B before we record, because I don't want to give away my thoughts. But Gene and I recently were on a road trip, and I was like, how about that scene when she pow right in the pussy?
Yeah, see, this is the thing. This is the thing. No, I'm glad you put it exactly that way, because this is what makes this movie great, is the fact that it's like, while you're hung up on, like, whether she would slap her or not, or how quickly she would kill her and all that stuff, King B and I are here watching her going, wow, she whacked her with that freaking poker, and then she takes a rifle and slams it into her fucking cooter and knocks her down. And I'm like, that is awesome. That is Alice being a fucking badass. And you see her like a little butterfly emerging from a cocoon, going from victim to victor. And, when she gets her face bashed against the ground on the beach, which, by the way, if you're going to smash somebody's head into the ground, it's a great attack. But yeah, not on sand. But you see, they're figuring out how to fight as they go along. And the whole time you're like, like Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, who doesn't stand up for herself, who ends up needing Donald Pleasance to come rescue her. In this case, Alice, finally gets pushed and pushed and pushed until she finally becomes a killer. And she just fucking gets pushed to that point of killing, pulls that machete out. And it was satisfying. It was like popping a fucking giant zit to just watch that head come off.
Well, that's unpleasant. I look at it, from the view of the wide, wide world of sports and murder. Alice isn't, she's a flighter, not a fighter. She's great at moving skills. She's great at getting away. When it does come to those physical conflicts, she's going to whack her with the poker, but then she knocks her down to get away. Gives her the old rifle butt in the chaunch to get away.
Pow, right in the pussy.
Pow, right in the pussy. And it's, she's focusing on her skill set, but not really focusing on like survival fundamentals. And yeah, it takes her being pushed to the limit to take it to that level. Before that, she again was just relying more on the foot bus, really. But there is that instinct in there. She is gonna live.
See, my notes literally said, where the fuck is her fight or flight instinct? Because she comes across a Jeep that could drive her out of there. She's given many opportunity to kill the person that has killed half a dozen people, and she just knocks her into a slight unconscious state and then hides in the cupboard where she almost falls asleep again. Does she have fucking narcolepsy?
Catching her second wind.
You're looking at it from the viewpoint of the audience.
That someone's trying to kill me and I better fucking kill them and get the fuck out of there?
Alice doesn't know what's going on. All she knows is
She
that
sees dead bodies everywhere.
she saw one dead body.
She saw a couple.
She saw Brenda.
She saw Brenda.
She saw...
Brenda.
She saw the one in the Jeep.
Everybody's gone.
Oh, sorry, two, yeah.
And then
Annie,
everybody's
who she
gone.
doesn't know.
No. But, I mean, the reason she's not taking the Jeep has a dead body in it. Clearly,
that
it's not
shit
a
out
safe place.
and drive away.
I would assume if I was at camp in the middle of a storm and friends started disappearing and I saw dead bodies, I would think there's probably several people here trying to kill us, not just one old lady. Especially when that old lady seems to be talking to someone else.
It makes a lot of sense. You've got the mystery going still because, again, like you said, the strength, the number of bodies, they're strewn about the place. Something's going on still.
Now, I will say, though, that if you don't go for the Jeep and you do go to the canoes, get in the fucking canoe. She gets to the beach and we're like, okay, cool, smart. Get in the water. That's good. Like, get in the canoe, get out in the water.
I did not think that was smart.
And she just goes and just sits on the beach. And I'm like, Alice, let's fucking go.
So I watched this movie late at night at work. I did not have any patience left. I get paid to sit there and do nothing. So I'm finishing this movie and my coworker is like, I asked her, do you mind if I watch this movie? And she was like, it terrified me as a child. I was a minister's daughter. I was not allowed to watch anything PG or R-rated or anything. So one time I had a sleepover, and of course the movie that they played was Friday the 13th, and I've had nightmares ever since. So I'm listening to the movie with my headphones on. I don't want to scare her. She's watching something about essential oils on her laptop. And I finally turn around. I'm like, Jenny, you got to watch this scene. I feel like I'm going to heal some childhood trauma for you if you just watch this one scene. We both were trauma ICU, surgical ICU nurses. We've literally seen people decapitated. So I'm like, you can handle gore. It's not that the gore is what scared you. So she rolls over in her office chair and I rewind it enough to show her the decapitation scene. And she's laughing hysterically. And she's like, this movie has given me nightmares for 30 years. And this is the worst thing I've ever seen in a movie. And I'm like, yeah, as a medical professional, I'm pretty sure that if your fucking spinal cord is severed, that you can't still move your fingers while you're crying in pain and dying.
As a person who's killed a chicken before...
It's not the same.
Despite my general dark demeanor and being rife with unhappiness, I don't think I've ever killed anything.
You've never killed anything?
You know what? Me and Jeff Bond, kid I was friends with in school, we wanted to shoot birds with a slingshot. And so we went to this field and we shot for like 3 hours and didn't hit one bird. So I went and bought a couple scoops full of bird seed and I seeded the field. The next day, you couldn't miss. I took one shot. I hit one bird. I did not kill it. I felt awful because it's just flopping around.
Didn't die?
I picked up a rock and I thumped on it until it stopped. And then I fed it to Jeff Bond's dog. I was filled with regret.
Still to this day?
I immediately felt, and I'm not one of those animals, I don't care. But I realized what an empty and useless thing that I had done. There was no purpose or point to it. I just did a shitty thing.
One time a butterfly landed on me when I was sitting in my grandparents' front yard and I ripped its wings off.
Whoa.
Yeah. How do you feel about that today? Would you do it again?
I wish I'd known this story before I let you dog sit.
No, I mean, Every fucking animal I have, I've rescued and nursed back to life from their dying infant deathbed. And my job is literally saving human lives. But I tore this butterfly's wings off because I thought it was like a flower. Like, he loves me not.
Jesus, what are you,
And my
Frankenstein?
older sister was like, what are you doing? She's like, you just ripped its wings off. And I was concerned. I was like, is it going to die? And she's like, probably.
All right, so finally, a traumatized Alice boards and falls asleep inside a canoe, which floats out on Crystal Lake. Just as Alice awakens and sees the police arriving, Jason's decomposing body suddenly emerges from the lake and drags her underwater. She awakens in a hospital where a police officer and medical staff tend to her. When Alice asks about Jason, the officer says that there was no sign of any boy. Alice says, then he's still there, as the lake is shown at peace.
Oh, Alice is asleep again? In a fucking canoe? She gets in a canoe, and instead of paddling away to possibly safety, the other side of the lake, getting in the Jeep, driving away, running, hiking out, screaming for help, she just simply crawls in a canoe and nods off to sleep with her hand dangling in the water.
Okay, you're a nurse, so I'm going to bow to your experience here. But, I mean, this poor woman has had adrenaline dumps for hours at this point. She's got to be worn the fuck out.
She has to be worn the fuck out, but I'm going to tell you, post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic experience, the last thing that you can fucking do is fall asleep.
All right.
I can't imagine her being in the boat and finally feeling safe enough to nod off and then having a fucking flashback night terror of my entire crew, friends, boyfriend, old lady killed by an old lady, being able to nod off.
Stop yelling at me.
All right, but consider this, though. Alice has done a lot of work today. She was hanging gutters. She was cleaning. She was running around in the forest. She built a very nice barricade. She's been doing a lot of heavy lifting. She beat an old woman to death and decapitated her. So, maybe she's just exhausted. Beyond all that, I'm in camp, let Alice die. Like, King B and I are watching this movie at the end, and the cops are there, and we're like, oh, what a fucking lame ending. And then Jason comes out of the water and, pulls her down in. And I'm like, man, this audience in 1980 in a theater must have been shitting their pants.
I was amazed. I recalled early memories and I go, oh, I know what's going to happen. And then it happened and I was so excited. I thought it was a fantastic fright. Like, it's genuine and real. It's not one of those cheap jump scares. It comes out of nowhere. And yeah, you're right. The audiences in the day, that must have been mind-blowing. You're going to have popcorn thrown in the air, people screaming. I loved it. I thought it would have been amazing had the movie just ended right there, where you've got this psychological thriller that all of a sudden has this mongoloid supernatural ending, just out of nowhere, boom.
And I think, speaking to that, further evidence that would have been the right way to do it is that, I get that they, we don't know what happened to Alice when she was underwater. The cops say they didn't find any boy. She just was pulled out, by their teams or whatever. But you realize that they even know that they fucking made a mistake, because in Friday the 13th 2, spoiler alert, fast forward about 15 seconds if you don't want to hear what happens in Friday the 13th 2.
That came out 30 years ago.
Yeah, but Friday the 13th 2, it's 5 years later, and Alice opens her fridge and Mrs. Voorhees' head is in there. And then she gets stabbed through the head. Alice gets stabbed through the head with an ice pick and dies. So it's like, they knew that they should have fucking just killed her off to begin with. And I think they were cleaning up a little bit of a mess there.
I was reading an interview by Tom Savini, who is the special effects director, and he did George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, another great movie. He said that every premiere nationwide, he hid behind the curtains, behind the screen for that last scene, because he wanted to see the audience's reaction to this like really gory, like decomposing Jason. And I think still to this day that it's pretty scary. It still holds up.
If that were my work, that would be immensely satisfying. I get a thrill just thinking about how amazing that would have been to have seen. Give me a time machine. I'm not stopping the Hitlers. I'm not curing the cancers. I'm going to go right back there. I want to see people scream to this.
On the point of sequels, I also read an interview that Miller was disappointed in all the sequels that made Jason the killer. And he was quoted saying, he was dead from the beginning. He was a victim, not a villain. So I haven't seen any of the sequels, But this is where, the hockey mask comes into play. And is it one of those things where they just kind of play off the first and make it its own thing after this?
So Friday the 13th 2 was actually the idea behind Friday the 13th was supposed to be an anthology where there were all these killings and horror movies that centered around the concept of Friday the 13th as the date, but not necessarily all about the same family, the same bloodline, any of that stuff. And it kind of spun out of control after the wild success of the first one. In fact, they made Friday the 13th Part 2 a year later. So, it came out in 1981. So they had to really move on that. All right. That being said, it is time to rate this movie on the Shat meter. Again, if you haven't listened to Shat the Movie before, or you're not familiar with the Shat scores, the Shat scale goes from a 0 to 5, being a perfect movie. It is a dip in Crystal Lake, coming out perfectly naked and pert like Marcy's boobs. A 5 is getting riddled with arrows and stuck to the door of the generator room like poor Bill. King B, will start with you since you are the guest tonight. What is your score for Friday the 13th?
So, the second time I came around, we reviewed Rambo, and I was not excited. I don't care for the macho military thing. I really wasn't into it. I felt equally not excited about this movie because I just don't care for modern horror and gore and jump scares. I think they're stupid. I was really engaged. I was surprised at how engaged I was throughout this movie. I'm calling it the perfect format for a murder movie that doesn't have to rely on these awful modern tropes that it supposedly was part of establishing. Everything's well lit. The characters are engaging. They're likable, but you don't regret them going because it does serve a purpose. I'd love to see more horror movies that are like this, that aren't focused on the shock and more focused on, the idea of real deep-seated terror and an uncontrollable force. I loved the ending. I thought about it on the drive home. I'm going to give it a 1.5 wipes.
1.5 wipes for King B. Also, I totally agree with you. And if you like this movie, there are several sequels that you can enjoy. Kerri Gross, what is your Shat score for Friday the 13th?
So I'd have to disagree with a few things that King B said, that I didn't find the characters likable. I thought Mrs. Voorhees being the killer at the end was a great plot twist, but that her acting and her character in itself was awful. I didn't like any of the campers. I didn't find one character likable. But I enjoyed the first-person point of view of the killer. I liked the twist at the end. I liked the gore. I liked Jason crawling out of the lake at the end and shocking everybody. I think it could have been better with better acting and dialogue. If you could mix in John Carpenter's soundtrack, it could be almost a perfect movie. I'm going to have to compare it, only in the sense that we're doing Halloween movies. I'm going to have to compare it to Halloween, which I felt like I enjoyed more. I felt like it was shorter. It was easier to watch. I didn't hate the characters as much, but I enjoyed the gore in this one a lot more. So I'm going to give it half a wipe better, and I'm going to say this is a 2-wipe movie.
All right. So that's 1.5 wipes from King B and 2 wipes from Kerri Gross. I agree with both of you. I think this movie was every bit as fun as it was in 1980. And it's surprisingly pretty. One thing we didn't talk about is these long shots they did, especially the one where Alice is on the canoe on Crystal Lake and you see all the trees kind of reflecting the water as dawn is rising. There's a lot of what they call scenery porn in the film industry. Basically, these big shots where they really took advantage of where they were shooting in New Jersey and really showed the beauty of the area and kind of the tranquility of the area. So I really appreciated that. The twists and the turns are clever without being complicated, which is another thing. I think Raj could even appreciate this movie where there was some mystery to it, but it wasn't like too complicated. You didn't really have to be paying close attention, but if you did, there were little extra nuggets for you. And I think it really set up a rich backstory for the franchise with Jason, his whole history, his mother, the history of the camp, the death curse, Camp Blood and all that. I think that there is a certain, it's the stuff that those campfire ghost stories are made of, right? The camp lore, that panache. So all of those I really loved, but I do agree with Kerri on one fact, which is I'd have to add a wipe for the stale scripting. I thought that some of the writing was a little bit stale. It's like they didn't know what real kids would say to each other. They didn't know what to make the people talk about. And so this could have been a completely pantomimed silent film, and it would have still been effective because what's happening on screen is really what matters, and not so much the dialogue. So with 1.5, 2, and 1 wipe added together, that gives us a total score of 4.5 wipes divided by the 3 of us. That is 1.5 wipes, which puts this movie tied in the 26th spot with The Thing and Scrooged and Spaceballs. So it is worse than Last Action Hero, but better than Gremlins. What do you guys think of that score?
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's great. You're right in there with some good horror and kind of fun films. It's a great fit.
Seeing it tied with The Thing really feels good for me because The Thing is another movie where I thought, I'm watching this, and yeah, there's a few flaws. I would say The Thing is slightly better, but for the most part, it's still evocative of the same feelings of you're thinking about what's going on, and the effects are good, but they're also somewhat dated, but still very effective in making you feel something.
Yeah, definitely, it's in good company. I do, like you said, I like The Thing. I would prefer to watch The Thing over this a second time. But you couldn't find a better seat.
So there you have it, 1.5 wipes for Friday the 13th. I want to thank the King Bee and Kerri Gross for being here tonight to record this and for watching the movie on short notice.
That concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat The Movies. Facebook, search for Shat The Movies Podcasts. Our website is shatthemovies.com. Our email is hosts@shatthemovies.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review that helps the podcast grow.
I'm sorry, was that Vincent Price?
Yeah.
Or the ghost of Roger?
Oh.
Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, and American Gods. You can find all of the information on our website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-host, Gene Lyons. And King B.
Pull the string! Pull the string!
I'm Kerri Gross. Be sure to join us next week for our next spooky thriller.
What is this place?
I brought you here to bury Alan's cat.
Daddy, is church all right?
Why, Judd?
I have my reasons.
I dreamed he got hit by a car and you and Mr. Crandall buried him in the pet cemetery.
What did we do tonight, Judd?
What we did, Lois, was a secret.
May the Lord bless you and keep you.
Has anyone ever buried a person up there?
May the Lord make his face to shine upon you.
You're thinking thoughts best not thought of.
Daddy's gonna do something really bad.
You're thinking of putting him up there. Don't deny the thought hadn't crossed your mind.
Come back to me, Gage. Come back to us.
Paramount Pictures presents Stephen King's all-time best-selling tale of horror. Pet Cemetery.